Good evening, Bethel Church family. I'm so glad that you joined us tonight. And we're going to get into the second part of the discussion from our district officials and the roundtable that they brought together regarding the racism in our culture today and some of the things that we can do about it. And so we're looking forward to this conversation tonight. And I just hope that you'll just join in and kind of listen and pay attention and think about some of the things that they're talking about. And so let's have a word of prayer, though, and let's ask the Lord to help us tonight. Lord, we do ask that you would just help us as we listen to this conversation. God, that you would open our minds and our hearts, that we could be part of the solutions, Lord, that are needed. Blessing on each and every one. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Well, let's get right into the discussion tonight. And after the discussion and the video, I'll be talking about Sunday morning and what to expect. All right, so take a look at this.
Welcome to the Elephant Room. This podcast is produced by the Louisiana Assemblies of God. Our vision is to encourage and equip leaders to do what God is calling you to do where He is calling you to do it. The goal of each session of the Elephant Room is to have an open and honest conversation around the issues that are affecting leadership today. Issues that are often neglected, hidden, or ignored. Issues that the church, in many cases, deemed too controversial to talk about. Here now to lead today's discussion is our Elephant Room host, Scott Holmes.
Hey, let's switch gears for a little bit, and I think that I'd like to ask you from the past to just let's deal a moment here with these present issues, and just throwing out these names of Ahmaud Arbery that and I guess I was a bit shocked that when I first went back to look at some of the details that the actual murder took place in February that we may have never even have heard of.
Right.
And it was weeks later, and it was only because of a little video that all of us are talking about it today. Of course, the George Floyd, which is the issue of this moment, but we could go back even to March, to Breonna Taylor, and the story there, which is just, you read some of these facts.
It's true.
And it leaves you speechless. It just leaves you, and guys, coming from a 57-year-old Caucasian white guy, I totally get the being taught respect. But it's one thing to be respectful just because we're in obedience to the Lord. It's a foreign concept to teach respect because it may save your life. That's something I'll never understand, and I admit that.
Could you say that again? Because I feel like the people hearing that's. I'm sorry, Pastor Scott. I asked if you could say that again because I feel like the people listening, as a black person,
Yes.
When you're raised, that's like a part of your upraising package.
Right.
Because children have to be taught that for the very reason of safety and longevity.
Exactly.
And that is something that I remember specifically my parents teaching me, not understanding at the moment why they were teaching me that, but later on realizing like, wow, they were giving me survival skills and tools to navigate through this world that unfortunately, what you said, you weren't you were taught respect for respect's sake. We're having to be taught two packages. We're taught package one, respect for respect's sake, and then we're taught part two, second package is respect for survival's sake. Because if not, it takes to be getting pulled over and becoming belligerent, and now your name is on the list of someone who, you know, and unfortunately that is a reality that young black people and, you know, have to be raised with. And that's not just something that started like 10 years ago. I'm 40, I'll be 43 this year. That was something I was taught at 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. So that I would not be in the situation if I was either pulled over by a police officer or pulled over by someone of authority. And I you know, I have the utmost of respect for authority. That is my DNA, especially being an athlete. You're taught authority. That's a part of being an athlete. You respect your coaches, you respect your teachers, you respect your, you know, whatever. But that is something that we're taught that a lot of people don't know. And I think when you said that, I really wanted to highlight that, because that's a reality. That you're not just taught respect, but you're having to be taught respect for safety and for your physical well-being.
I think, Pastor, if we could go back to your statement about, you know, the systemic issues, and I know you addressed that. But Pastor John, as you were making that statement, you know, just this thought to me is there's a difference in teaching a biblical principle for the sake of success, as opposed to teaching a principle for the sake of survival.
That's true.
And you know, I think that's the systemic. If we could come back to that, even our churches, you know, we want to teach, you know, all of our folks, you know, of every ethnicity, of every age, you know, man, we're wanting to teach you biblical principle, which is love and honor and respect. But we're teaching you this because it's God's plan for blessing in your life.
Yes.
But if we're having to teach those same basic principles we want kids to survive, boy, that's a systemic issue right there, you know, and it comes back to that. So, that's a powerful moment, you know, of understanding, especially, you know, growing up in a white environment, and I'm not just talking for me, but for all of our folks that are tuning in as well. You know, it's a totally different mindset that if we don't have these kinds of conversations, we don't realize the difference. We don't understand where that. Because we all look at it, and again, from a white perspective, we might try to just excuse it away without realizing the seriousness of that.
And I think my personal experience, and I'm only speaking from my personal experience, is that is exactly what happens. From a white perspective, you know, as I live, you know, I'm 53 now, so I know a little bit more than what I knew at 30. And I've been a part of many committees and many activities geared towards race relations and geared towards you know, tearing down divides and all of those things. Is you know, part of the reason why I got in the Assemblies of God 21 years ago was because of that reason. I wanted to be a part of the solution in terms of you know, breaking down. It would have been easier for me to, you know, stay Church of God in Christ. It would have been easier for me to do that. But in terms of how I wanted to engage people in terms of salvation and reaching people for the kingdom, you know, I wanted it to be, you know, from an honest, pure spot, you know, for everybody. But the truth of the matter is, when you're a part of these different things, that they don't. I say they as a group of people. A lot of times we talk about what we want to do to get things, to make things better, what have you, but we really don't, because it's going to involve us having to do something or change ourselves. And that is what I see in my world that I live in, is that, you know, you have all of these different pastor groups and different kind of groups to try to address these issues. But at the end of the day, they'll be forced to, for instance, okay, let's get rid of the flag. Let's get rid of anything that's causing us problems. Let's just get rid of it. It doesn't matter. Let's just change the name to something else, right? But that never gets done because we don't really want to change, and that's the reality. And then we cover it with respect, and from the respect from that angle, because we know that we're supposed to respect our elders and we don't respect authority, different things like that. But it's different for for us, because it's when we teach that respect, because the Bible says teach it, and it is true. But at the same time, when we get young people to come in our office for counseling because the parent brought them in there, then we have to tell them, look, this is what you have to do. Okay? And this goes beyond you. This goes beyond you, doing it for, hey, listen, we love you, we want to see you, and here's what you have to do. The world is not, they don't understand it the way you understand it. See, everyone's not going to believe, everyone is not saved, and then we have to tell, and then that's why parents have to tell us, even, in times past when our parents was, a lot of our parents weren't educated or undereducated, and they would tell you things like this. Now, I don't care what John doing, you my son, and here's what I want you to do. And the reason why they did that, because that was all the capability that they had for you to understand why you can't do certain things. I mean, I remember coming home, getting a ride home from football practice with somebody, but that concerned my parents. It, not because it was that, but it concerned them because they lived in a time when you got in a truck with white boys or whatever like that, you might not come back home. Yeah. But I didn't get that at first, but I later understood that, because that's the perspective that some people, that some people have come from, and like most African Americans, most minorities deal with that. Now, there are some that don't, but most do. And it's a reality. It's a small percentage. You're talking about 13% of the population, but you're talking about 80, 90% of prison populations, all of these things because of what happens to them, 8 years old, 10 years old, different things like that. So, I mean, what you said, I was glad he paused you on that, because that's very, very powerful. And I don't think it's because people are just that white America or white people in general are just mean or something like that. I don't think they understand that there is two levels of respect that you have to teach, for in a black home or in a black church or in a black community, and we know what's right, and it's very difficult for us as pastors or police officers that are African American, what have you, who understand this, and they're trying to balance both sides of the house.
Wow, that's good. Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, just great perspective, and even with these questions that you presented, these individuals that you presented, Pastor Scott. One of the things that as I've been processing this, most of you may have heard about a scenario that happened actually the same day as the George Floyd incident, was a lady by the name of Amy Cooper that was in Central Park.
Yes.
And if you're not familiar with that story, Amy Cooper, she was out with her dog. And there was a sign up that says that in this bird sanctuary, all dogs have to be on a leash. Well, there's this black guy who observes birds. And now, I don't know about y'all, but this is funny to me. That's like a stereotype to me. How many black dudes bird watching? It don't go together. But anyway, it's in New York. So,
You profiling.
I'm profiling.
But you know what? That's a legitimate profile, because that shows how far away from a threat the guy was. If you're bird watching, there's no thug in you. There's no danger in you. There's, I mean,
Right.
Nerds. I mean, yeah, we can it's real.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, John. Thank you, Pastor John. Right, you're with me. So, and not only does, and his last name happened to be Cooper too, and so he is so accustomed to being in this area that he keeps dog treats on him, because he said, this is a place, I guess that's his sanctuary. He's saying, look, this is a place where I come. I don't want anybody messing it up. So Amy Cooper comes, and she is in this area, and he says, ma'am, excuse me. He said, this sign is showing that, you need to put your dog on a leash. Well, she gets belligerent and irate. And she starts to she could not believe that this black guy would tell her to put her dog on a leash. Well, as a result of that, she said, I am going to call the police, and I am going to tell them that a black guy is attacking me. And he said, well, you do what you do, I'm going to do what I do. Well, he starts to record the incident. Well, she is on the phone, and she is just screaming, and she's yelling. She's saying he's attacking me. In that process, he pull out his pocket, pull out his dog treats. Well, the dog is coming toward him. Well, she is coming toward him, which, by the way, you never go towards somebody that you feel threatened by.
Right.
And so she hollers and she screams. Well, they have all of this on footage. Well, it comes to a point, and as I'm reflecting and as I'm thinking on that, one of the things that starts to occur to me, that Amy makes this statement that I am going to call the police and tell them I'm being attacked by a black guy. What she was in essence saying, what I'm about to do is you're going to know the consequences of your actions, because I'm superior.
Right.
The system is designed to protect me
Exactly.
and to convict you.
Exactly.
And so as a result of that, by you even communicating to me was of the utmost disrespect to me, because you don't never speak to me, I speak to you.
Wow.
And so in that statement, it brought this moment to where we see, when we talk about systemic racism, this is a picture perfect example of the system that is going to accommodate that type of behavior. And one of the things that happened, as you think about it, a federal offense is that if you pull an alarm system in any public facility, you go into prison. Well, now, prior to this, you can make a false accusation and nothing never happens to you. Well, now you're going to have to start revisiting laws to say, are we going to put this on the same level, because of the fact that recently we've been watching America's Got Talent with the guy Archie Williams, where he gets 37 years in prison for an accusation that he raped a young white girl 37 years ago. And he just was exonerated.
37 years.
37 years of this man's life has been taken because of the systemic racism that exists, because it's in the mind, it's saying this system works for me and it works against you.
Well, she was doing what she's always done, and that's what it was. Like a lot of time when they think about racism, they go directly to the white man.
Yes.
But it's not always been that. It's what the white woman has said a lot of times that have caused a lot of murders, a lot of different things like that has been going on. But that's part of a problem. That's part of a system because they're being taught that that's what you do when you see a black man, or you see a threat or anything from that, different things like that.
Yes.
So that is something that was, you're not going to believe that if the police is called on that situation and there's not a video of that, you're not going to believe him. I don't care if he's the biggest nerd in New York. You're not going to believe that, because it had to be this way. But that comes out of what has always been.
And exactly, Pastor, and as you say that has always been the system. That's
Right.
always been the case. And how many individuals are in prison today
Murdered.
because of a false accusation?
Yeah.
Wow.
And if it wasn't for a video that was being leaked, which leads into
These.
our next discussion of
Yeah.
Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, only footage was a reason of these scenarios. So I'll
Wow.
You know, Pastor Scott,
let me say something here. Just a thought hit me, and I know it's not the case in every situation, but in so many situations, it's like if I'm arrested, the burden is going to be to prove that I'm guilty.
yes.
If you're arrested, the burden is going to be to prove your innocence.
That's exactly it's powerful.
you know what?
Powerful.
See another thing that just to piggyback on what you were saying earlier. If you pay attention, generally, if a white person wants to commit a crime and stage it, what do they say? They always blame someone black. They always do that. A black man took my car. So, you know, like the lady who murdered her 2 kids, and she pushed her her car into the lake.
Yeah.
She said she was hijacked by a black man.
Right.
You see, and that's the thing that's been going on. Matter of fact, there's a historical situation that took place, made into a movie, Redwood. You see, Redwood.
Yeah.
And it was because a white girl said I was raped. Now she's fooling around.
Right.
Okay, but she said I was raped by a black man. Burned the whole town down because of it.
That's right.
But one thing is that, See, Pastor, I'm not supposed to know as much as you know. I'm not supposed to go as far in school and, you know, around the world and just, you know, I'm not supposed to do all that. See? I'm supposed to remain just a little bit above a slave. And I say a little bit above a slave because slavery been outlawed. Okay, so you are, you know, put in a place where people think that you're not supposed to achieve. If you say, well, I want to be a doctor when I grow up, you can't be no doctor. You don't have that kind of sense. You know, you ain't been around no doctors. How you want to be a doctor? See, that's the mentality that people have, is that we are always, I don't care what level of life, you know, you reach in this world, they are always going to feel that we can't reach them.
Until you prove it.
Until you prove it. And then that's
Benjamin
when.
Carson did it. Dr. Benjamin
Yeah.
Carson.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's Sullivan. I love what you brought out here, is that today, without a cell phone,
Right.
we wouldn't be sitting around. Now, the acts would have still happened. We can't change what have happened. We just, without proof, we wouldn't be sitting around here talking about this because we wouldn't know it. So, boy, that's a powerful answer of how do you process that, you know, and just tying all those things together, because there was some video footage. Just let's spend just another moment here on this one thing. You know, how do you process this? How do you tell your kids to process this? I know some of you have smaller children that this may not be, you know, outside of their world, but for those of you with some teenagers, and I know you have some boys.
Yes.
You know, how do you help them process that?
Even in this scenario, you know, with the George Floyd situation that occurred, just in that moment when you seeing that officer, obviously, you know, there's a lot of different speculations that take place that, of course, he puts him in the car. Some reports are saying they took him out of the vehicle, out of the police vehicle, and at one point, all 4 of the police officers really were physically engaged with him at some point when obviously he was not a threat or was not a resistant arrest. And the thing that really, you know, struck me during that time was at one point when the officer put his knee on Floyd's neck, and you saw that Floyd really kind of moved, the officer put his hands on the vehicle, on the police car, and repositioned himself and reestablished his knee on his neck. And in one scenario, it looks like he either had his hands in his pocket or on his hips, which he was not in any way experiencing or feeling threatened. And as I began to process that, I'm looking at this, and it's an obvious situation that this officer is saying. He's being recorded. You hear people in the background saying, you're going to kill him. Why don't you get off of him? I saw no emotion on his part at all. And I also, I recognized that this officer really felt in his heart that whatever the repercussions was going to be from this situation, that he will not be convicted. He knew, I felt like he knew in his heart that I will not face any significant sentence or any significant justice will come to this, because the laws are designed and catered towards to protect me. And as I began to think about that, I had this conversation with my kids. I have 4, and I began to tell them just this scenario because, obviously, law enforcement, one of my best friends who passed away a few years ago, you talk about just integrity, character, a godly man, and there always are all these officers throughout every force. There's always going to be individuals who protect and serve, but obviously those that don't, they can't get a pass. And so I'm telling my boys this, and I had to begin to explain to them when you start driving and you get pulled over by an officer, you're going to have to say, officer, I'm going to comply with whatever commands that you give me. I'm just going to leave my hands on the steering wheel where you can see them. Right. And I felt so, why does a 10-year-old, a 13-year-old, I have to have this type of conversation at this time? And it really struck me because in a similar format to this, I heard a very prominent pastor who's well known all over America, and he was discussing this, and he said, when my son was pulled over when he was a kid, probably doing something, he said, as a Caucasian, as a white pastor, a white man, he said, I had no fear whatsoever that anything would happen to him. He said, they called me on the phone. He said, I never feared for his life. And he said, I know that that's not the case right now as a result to African Americans. And so it really struck me for someone to have that type of conversation. And for me to share that with my kids, it just really, really bothered me, because it's like we live in 2020 and we still having to have these type of conversations.
Well, even all 3 of my children are driving. Of course, we want to make sure that their car is as basic and as simple as possible, so it doesn't bring or draw any attention. Even when it comes to tinted windows, they're going to be legal or just barely under that, because we want to make sure that, hey, you're putting yourself in a position that if you do get pulled over, so you put your registration insurance in this part, so it's easily accessible and you know what you're reaching for if that were to ever happen. Right. Now, but thankfully neither of them have ever been pulled over, but it's still a topic of conversation. Yeah. And I think it's important, because I know my kids, I know that they're not going to be out, unruly, causing ruckus, because we've trained them in that way. And even to the fact of, hey, we want them to have their own vehicles, especially when they went off to college, because you got to be conscious of who you're riding with. Right. Sometimes you're guilty by association. So I think all of those things are lessons that can be taught at home. Unfortunately, a lot of African American kids are not getting those lessons. Why? Because of fatherlessness. Now, I look at my position as a coach, and I always say that I'm God's agent disguised as a basketball coach. So I get kids from all walks of life. The same lessons that I teach my children are the same lessons. It doesn't matter what background they come from. I told Coach, we have a kid from New Orleans, grew up in the project, and probably one of the most mannerable kids you can be around. But he still had some tendencies. And in a predominantly, as you call them, a P-Dub, predominantly white university, there's some things that you have to get accustomed to in the recruiting process. You're coming into an organization. I expect organization, but when we talked about sometimes the unwritten rule, here's some guidelines that are before you in terms of the university. But let's go ahead and talk about how you're going to act in this program. There are going to be some instances that may come up, whether it's with a professor, if it's with somebody on the campus. Make sure you're not acting too far out of character, because I want to be able to help salvage you and move you forward in this process. So, unfortunately, I wouldn't say unfortunately, but it's things that we have to teach, we have to instruct, and going above and beyond reproach. And I think it's only the right thing to do.
I think if I could insert something here, I want to go back, Pastor. I'm drawn back to what you said because I hear what you say, and again, in many cases, it's like we're speaking different languages, And but as I listen and I look at this question of how do you process these present tragedies, the way you look at this is you're having to reteach mannerisms. You're having to reteach and remind, whether it's your children or those folks that you influence, maybe the young people at your church, and again, I know we're headed to the solution part, and I realize until we can get to that solution, to where we live in a world of equality, which we don't, that we have to address these issues, but that just seems to me a challenge. It's a challenge to hear this, that we have to teach that.
It's true.
Because that's not in my world. That's not something that is, and when I say my world, I think I could speak, pretty reasonably to say in the white world, that's not something that, hey, we have to tell people how to respond when they get stopped by a police officer, or we have to, walking through whatever system or organization, this is how you have to respond, and this is what you have to be, really cognizant of. And to me, again, that goes back to that systemic thing. We're still having to teach survival skills. I know I'm going back to that. I don't want to. I don't want to keep repeating myself. But as long as we're stuck in survival mode, we're just not going to get to
exactly
how can we move past that? So, man, how do we process this? How do we process this tragedy?
I think while we're talking about survival mode, unfortunately, and I do want to use the word unfortunately, all of us at this table are here with you because we learned survival skills.
Interesting.
It was the very survival skills that we were taught that have navigated us through the different challenges and phases of life, of racism, of, you come in on the heels of segregation because of your age and, your educational experience. It was because of the survival skills that we've made it, and other, African-American men didn't make it. And that's sad because, and my heart breaks because I have to teach my young black, kids, students, members, I have to teach them survival skills. Melvin was on staff with you. He's been on staff with you. Melvin got saved in our church. He was from uptown New Orleans, grew up on Josephine Street, one of the worst neighborhoods in the whole, I wouldn't just say in New Orleans. I believe that neighborhood is one of the worst neighborhoods in America.
Wow.
And when I met Melvin, because I've been to Flatbush, Brooklyn, and Flatbush, Brooklyn reminds me of that part of New Orleans. These are two of the toughest places in the country. And I remember teaching Melvin how to dress, teaching him how to talk in public, teaching him how to approach people of other cultures and races. A lot of what you see in Melvin Stringfield today in his 30s, I started working with him when he was 16 years old because I understood as a single kid from the, who grew up between two projects, the Malfamine and the Magnolia projects. He was smothered in the middle of it without a father, who had never met his father and was a minority, and grew up in a neighborhood that was prone to murder and crime, that his chances of survival were so slim. And I took him and I said to God, I said, Lord, how do I pluck this kid from this neighborhood? And Melvin's goal, and you can ask him, when me and Melvin used to talk when he was a teenager, his number one goal in life was to get out of his neighborhood and just survive. That was his goal. It wasn't to be a youth pastor. It wasn't to go to college. It was just to make it out of his neighborhood and just to not go to jail or die before he made it through his high school years. That was his goal. So when I talk about we were talking about this, earlier before the meeting, that's the level of, when I think about ministry in New Orleans for the last 20 years, that's what ministry is to me. It's not an altar call. It's not, are you born again? Is how do I keep you alive long enough to have a future? That was the ministry that my wife and I did for years, and it's just been within maybe the last several years that we've transitioned out of that being like the core of our ministry. And that's like, now we have kids that we know you're going to college, we know you're, but it wasn't always like that. But it was the survival skills. I would have two things. I would say, okay, Mel, we're going to talk about the Bible. We're going to read the book of Proverbs, and we're going to talk about how do you get through this week and not get shot, not get robbed on your way home from school. How do you not sell drugs because he was in poverty? My wife and I used to feed him and we'll make sure he had food to eat. I mean, that was the level of what we dealt with. And the rules aren't the same. And that's what the rules not looking the same look like. It's not just people saying, oh, we have different rules. No, this is what it looks like on a day-to-day basis and with a real life. So, I think the approach and the heart that we've had to take has been that, because if you don't, a kid like him, they're just another statistic that you see on the blip on the news channel. They don't make it. They don't become a youth pastor because they never survived their neighborhood to ever get the opportunity to become a man of God. And that's a reality of what survival skills. That's why we have to do survival skills in the Black community, especially amongst young Black men. That's a reality. That's a reality that we have to live and face throughout our lives until we get older. I think us in our 40s, 50s, 60s are less likely at this stage, but it wasn't always that way. As teenagers and then 20s, it is, your life is predicated on having those survival skills to get to our age and beyond. That's true.
And
Go ahead.
just to piggyback off you, that's why so many people kind of run away from inner city urban ministries, because there's a whole different level of issues and problems and and support that you have to be engaged in. So it's just not, let's disciple you to be a man or woman of God. No, we got to teach survival. Let's look at your friends. Who are you hanging around? We got to look at, what about just mannerisms? And like right now, and it's crazy that we're going through this because we started this series on anger about a month ago. And so it's like, I'm going through it with our men, shout out to Regeneration Church men. They're going to watch this later. They're going to appreciate that. But we've been dealing with anger and uncovering the roots of anger. Not just waiting till we get angry, because that's a lot of times too late. Because we it's dangerous. So, of course, the Bible says, be angry, but sin not.
But a lot of times what we have to understand is that when we get angry, it's almost too late. We're going to sin because if we haven't been taught how to set those boundaries, we explode. And that's what we're seeing right now. So what we're doing with the men is that we're uncovering roots of anger. Like, what are the roots of this thing? And this is the issue we have today, is that we keep pulling the head off the weed. That's what we're doing. We keep pulling the head off the weed, and guess what it does? It grows back, and it grows back stronger and stronger.
And again, if I can just make this comment as we again moving forward, because I think if we look at this question of how do we move forward, because one of the things that just keeps rumbling around in my head, and I think Byron, you said it earlier, Coach, about we're gonna be right back here in 4 more years, or 3 more years, or we're gonna keep having this conversation. That if the answer to this question number 3 of how we process this, and I hear that, and I'm not in any way trying to disagree with your answers of the fact that what it is what it's showing me is how we process this is it's bringing us back to having to reteach some principles of survival, how just reteaching, rethinking some of these areas, and as long as we're stuck in that mode, we're going to keep coming back to this moment, because at some point in time somebody's going to let their guard down and we're going to have the same thing happen again. So,
but it's a constant, and I say this, we have what we call mind massages. So the minute a young man enters my program, it's all about transforming his mind first, so we can eventually get to the heart issues. And I feel like when we're transforming the mind, and they start understanding, okay, I can do this, I can survive in this world. See, it's up to me, not, as I mentioned, not to teach them a victim mentality, but a victor mentality. How can you overcome? Because you're going to face a trial. Everybody in this room has probably faced some kind of issue. Did it scar you to the point where you still couldn't continue life? Nope, because we wouldn't be here today. So how can we overcome that? How can we put a plan in place? I had a candid talk with my athletic director, and I said, you don't understand the kids that I'm working with. And he says, yes, I do. I said, well, tell me some of the kids you have in your program, which he's the baseball coach. Yeah. And he says, well, I got this one kid that has, mom is struggling, dad somewhere around. I said, well, I got 15 of those. But the issues are bigger. You got one that's in the project. You got one that says, hey, mom says, you got to find a way to make it. I have nothing to do with it. Then you have another one who has to be the leader in his home. He's the older brother. Mom, he has a younger brother, has another younger sister, and now she's just had another baby. And you can see the pressure and the weight, because financially, he has to get student loans. Some of them have to get student loans to even be a part of the program through Pell monies. So these are young people that are trying to make it. So some of those guys are one step from the good system or one step away from the bad system. How can we redirect that? And I say with the mind massages and putting them in a position where they can be successful. So I feel a 2-year institution, any other community college, some form of formal education that can help them get a leg up in society.
Yeah. And can I say something real quick? Basically, piggybacking on what you said, even when you teach and you try to mentor and instruct kids to go in the right direction, it is still a challenge.
Sure.
And you can still lose them. For example, in our ministry, we lost 3 to prison. 3. And they kind of, hung with each other and kind of fed off each other. But what usually happens while you're instructing them here,
somebody else,
they're being influenced out there.
Culture.
See, and that's the challenge that we face.
The same thing you said, and I'm going to close with this, is when I had some of those young men go back home, we lost 2 because they were in a structured environment, but then they go back home and now they're back into the same environment, and they say, you know what, now then he's in a position where he didn't finish school, doesn't know what he wants to do. Mom kicked him out of the house, so now I'm just trying to figure it all out, Coach.
Wow.
You see, those are the things that even when they're on our campus. Now, remember, this program has been in existence 2 years. I'm a program that's majority African American. Some of our professors or administrators were not ready for the element of kids.
Yeah.
It's not like they're terrible kids now. I think we have some of the most well-mannered, well-behaved, even from the custodians who tell me how much my guys are respectful and take care of responsibilities on the campus. But if I have a level 1 student, which is your lowest level learner, level 4, your highest level learner, and you put a level 1 in a majority classroom with level 4s and it's just going over their head and it's not being addressed, where we as coaches have to take those same young men, mold them together, and put out a good product night in and night out, or at least 2 nights out of the week where we're being observed. So I say if we can do that as coaches, why can't it happen in the classroom? Which it does. I'm saying there's a lot of positive things, but I'm talking about in terms of the element of student that you have.
Right.
How can you get this level 1 or up there to the level 4 where he's a high level learner?
That's good.
Well,
How do you? Oh, wait.
Sure. Well, my issue with this is when we look at all these cases, when the Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna and George Floyd situation, I've been saying during this COVID-19 series, I've been preaching a series of messages under the umbrella of what we do right now is what's going to determine who we are when this is over. And it was kind of odd. Nobody didn't know all this stuff right here was going to happen, but I do think that it's reflectory of this right here. So what's going to happen on the here at on a community level and our church level? What's going to happen politically? What type of attitude we're going to take as a nation? All of that matters because if we don't do something now, if we don't change the way that we've approached these issues in the past, it's going to continue to be. It may even be even more explosive. So I think the riots and things like that, those are only the beginning of our problems if we don't understand that we really have to change. It's like God is saying, guys, listen, I'm trying to work with y'all, but y'all gonna have to do better. And so it's like, with these issues right here, then so we've got to do things like kind of like what we're doing here today, but it can't end. It can't end with, okay, we had the meeting, it's fixed. It's not fixed. There's a disadvantage. We've got to do some things to catch people up. We've got to take some bold steps in helping people so that they don't continue so that this type of things don't continue to happen. Because every time this happens, it's like, I knew it, and then it's like I'm next. It's like, and it's gonna wait, and then it's like Coach said here, 4 months later, something else is gonna happen, and it's like, okay, this is the world we live in, and then we skirt around it and say, oh, that's terrible, that's sad, and we do little different things, that's, no one knows anybody's heart. Not saying they're doing it for the wrong reason, but it doesn't stay. This is an issue. This is something. This is generational. This is something that's been here, a long time, as long as America's been here. And so now we are now at a boiling point where, you calling this meeting is bold. It is. I had to make it to this meeting. I had to make it to this meeting because finally, okay, maybe we can start talking the same language, and maybe now that there's people that fit your demographic that will be willing to do this, not for a things like this can become a fad too, but for publicity stunt. But they'll do it for real, to where we can see real change, so that our young black boys and minorities and people don't feel and do, because when this happens, this is what every black young man says is happening again. Hope it don't happen to me.
Yeah. Let me just say, I know, Pastor, I know you want to say, let me just throw this out real quick and just go around. In your estimation, we talked a little bit about past, present. Obviously, you made the great observation, Pastor Sullivan, that without video, we wouldn't even be talking about this. You know, so obviously, I think we're naive if we don't embrace the fact that there's a lot of stuff happening that isn't caught on video.
Absolutely.
So, in your estimation, and Pastor Thomas, I'm gonna start with you. Better, just one word, better or worse, as far as the racial tension and the way that our culture is dealing with this issue? Is it better now or worse now than, you know, in your context, just in your lifetime? Let's not go back 60, 70, 80 years. We really have no way other than just history books but how would you assess that? Just in your honest thought, better or worse?
In terms of how, we'll say, blacks in general are affected in everyday life, it has to be better.
Okay.
You know, and I'm saying that, you know, because it's not a legalized racism anymore. You know, whether it's on where it's on a law book where you talked about discrimination, Jim Crowism, you know, miscegenation, all this kind of stuff. So on a day-to-day basis, general in blacks it's better. However, I'll guess on a functional level where society is concerned, you know, where society functions every day, it's worse. Okay, I would say it like that. Because see, in essence, if it was what it used to be, we probably wouldn't be in this room, you know, together with you.
Okay.
You see, and together with the other people who are here on staff, and then there are many of us who have white friends who are, you know, very good white friends. Yeah. You see, so in that regard, yes, it's better. You know, in other regards, we wouldn't have had a black president had it not been better. You see, so there has been improvement. We can't say there hasn't been, but the problem is, I guess, on these individual levels, when something happened and then because of social media it gets blown, perhaps even out of proportion, and then we have this. Right. You see, so if this keeps happening, if one spark creates a forest fire every single time, we're going to have a lot of problems.
Okay, now let me throw out a couple of thoughts here because, again, in any case, you can put this principle and apply it to anything. Bad behavior is never acceptable.
No, never.
We're all in agreement there because that's a biblical principle. Okay, but if we don't have a reaction, will we ever address the issue? That's why I can't condemn the reaction, even if the reaction is wrong.
Right.
Because without the reaction, it is very simple to just overlook it. Yeah. So I don't want to give legitimacy to the reaction when the reaction's wrong, but at least it's bringing us around the table to talk about it and others as well.
I guess this kind of reaction is an inevitability.
Yeah.
We don't want it to see it to happen. I have different opinions on it. You know, I can probably anger some people with some of my opinions.
I enjoy reading your Facebook posts. They're amazing. They're amazing.
And I'm not trying to anger anyone because, see, my basis is different. Yeah. My basis is not racist, okay? My basis is biblical. Right. You see, so I answer from that perspective. Sure. And not everybody's going to see that perspective, therefore they're not going to agree with it, and I get that. Right. You see, but again, like I'm saying, I have a few choice words for this reaction only because this is my pet peeve, and it's been my pet peeve ever since, you know, going back to the 60s and, you know, when I got old enough to understand. My problem is that, okay, yes, we have a black man who was brutally murdered by a white man, but then there's too much of that takes place in the black community on a weekly basis. Yeah. And that's my problem. That gets absolutely no reaction at all, and it continues over and over and over. I get fed up with the black on black crime and the black on black murders. You know, I'm just totally fed up with it. Okay, but then when I see, and then everyone understands it, but then when I see this kind of reaction over over a killing here, then to me it's disingenuous at this point. Now, I understand the anger and the rage. I am black.
Sure.
I understand the anger and the rage.
Yeah.
But the problem is I also see that they don't understand the severity of this kind of reaction. Right. It's bad. And I'll end it with this. See, the problem, what they don't realize is that if we keep having these riots and keep having this kind of violent reaction, you're going to end up with something worse. You're going to end up with the police state.
Right.
It's just a matter of time. You heard the president the other day.
Yeah.
You see, and I said this before he said what he said. Okay, if the National Guard doesn't do it, we're going to send in the Army. You don't want that. Now we're going to become like, some of these oppressive regimes. You see, if we don't do something about it, so we have to get down and educate the people. Protest, yes, I'm all for protests. I'm just not for violence and vandalism.
Right. Yeah. Good. Jonathan, again, Pastor, better or worse in your lifetime? What do you think?
I have a different outlook on it. I don't think it's better or worse.
Okay.
I think it's just changed vehicles. It's a scheme. And like the enemy, he's the master deceiver. And so I believe throughout the generations, it's just changed vehicles. But what we're seeing now is just an oppressive system that has always been here. It's just now with social media and you're able to catch things because, even look at it when you go back to George Floyd, all of those police out there with those body cams on, but it was a civilian that got the best tape, the best image. Why is that? Think about all the policemen. There was 4 over there by him, and there was police all around there. But when you saw the body cam, we can't really see what's going on through the body cam. But there's a civilian that got great footage. Why was that civilian's footage better than even the body cam? You look at how we process it. When I look at all 3 of these, George Floyd really stands out because as you had a guy position himself, and he kind of was over he was posing. It's like he was looking around. He wasn't looking to see what was going on with George Floyd. He was posing. And what that spoke to me is that here's a hunter proud of his prey. When you think about people when they deer hunt and they get a prized possession, they kneel down. No, but they kneel down next to their prey, right? A big deer with antlers, they kneel down to say, look what I did. And it's almost like he knew, I'm doing this on purpose. And this is my trophy. This is my trophy, and I'm speaking 1,000 words to you, and you don't realize. So while I'm looking at you in your face, I'm letting you know you can't do anything about it, and I'm going to execute them right in front of you.
Wow. I know why.
That's good. That's good.
I know the answer to that. The body cams were pointing towards the car.
Yeah.
3 of them.
Yep.
Yeah, they were all
right towards the car.
Yep.
And the other guy, he was facing the audience.
Yep.
So that's why.
Yep.
better or worse.
Better or worse. I would say overall, I would say it's better due to the fact that, even in my position, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I wouldn't even be in a staff position where I am today. I wouldn't be in a district official office, as far as holding a district position office as I do today. And so I see the steps that are taken to bring understanding. I see, the steps that are taken to have these type of conversations, because prior to this, one of the things that I often reflect on is most of the time when you deal with the subject of racism, most people will automatically assume that it's the blacks that are pointing to whites and say that you're racist. So that's one element that creates some tension. The other element that creates tension is that if I'm talking to some white individual about racism, automatically what'll come to the mind is that I'm not like that. Mm-hmm. So now, but you're talking in reference to a group of a demographic that you're equating racism with. And so as a result of that, if I'm not like that, now I automatically turn off to what you're about to say, because now I'm going into defense mode. Mm-hmm. And so it creates this barrier. Scripture says they triumphant over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony.
Yeah.
Well, the triumphant didn't happen. Jesus had already did the triumphant. Yeah. It's our part now as far as the testimony. If I'm listening to what you're saying and engaging, let eyes to see and ears to hear, I begin to gain an understanding. And I'm feeling like now a lot more people are willing to start engaging in that type of conversation.
Oh, good. I like that. I like it. Pastor Don, better or worse?
I've been trying to sit here and think about it. For me, it is the same.
Yeah.
It's not better and it's not worse. It is what it is. I think it's just a repeat of what always has been, and it's just taken on a different format. I think that even largely all of the problems that we discuss as a result to racism, we get into some of the other issues that were mentioned. We talk about drugs, we talk about poverty, we could talk about black on black crime, things like that. And all of those are, in my estimation, a result of racism because measures are taken by people that are black to survive, and it's another form of survival. And they get in those things, and it brings the mess that we see. We see, and like you said, by time sin takes us to a place we don't intend to go. Nobody, that does crack cocaine, probably nobody wants to do that, and they know they shouldn't be doing it. And you get to a place where you can't come out of, or even the ones that's selling it, or even the ones and the murders that take place. All those are a result of what's happening that made that happen. It's because racism. People are oppressed. They feel like they're neck. Black people feel like they identify with George Floyd because they feel like that's what's happening to me.
Yeah.
He's got their neck on me, and I'm having to do this to make it. Or if I get out of prison, I've got to go do this to make a living because I can't do it at McDonald's or what have you. Mm-hmm. So to me, just to me, from my perspective and what I see and what I deal with every day, as a community leader and a pastor in my area, it is exactly the same.
Same. Okay. Pastor Frank.
I think it's better because of my own personal experience. Mm-hmm. Now, if I look at the whole scheme of things, I would say it's either no better or worse. But I have to look at my own personal experience. Now, when we were living in Bastrop, when my wife and I first started out, we started out as home missions. Mm-hmm. And so our original goal was to go to Bastrop and plant a church. But it wasn't necessarily in God's plan, and so God had told us years ago that we were coming back to Monroe. Mm-hmm. And things kind of worked out in a way in Bastrop that enabled us to come back to Monroe. But we had the hardest time trying to get settled in Monroe because none of the churches here, they wouldn't give us a dime, so we had to borrow money to move from Bastrop to Monroe. And the thing is, I could have got bitter, and said these folks, they really don't want our help or anything. But I chose to take the high road. And a few years later, matter of fact, one night, I never told you this. One night I went to his church. And when I walked in the door, because they had built a new sanctuary and, all kind of construction. And so when I walked in his church, the first thing I heard was the voice of the Lord. He said, this is what I want you to do. Mm. So he was telling us, I want you to build a church. Mm. And some years earlier, the district, because we were going to buy a church building and put it on some land. Well, that didn't work out. And so, but the district bought the land for us. And when God spoke to me about building the church, he wanted us to put the church on that land. That's why we could never put anything else on it. And those same churches that, wouldn't give me a dime, they all got together and gave us $40,000. So you see, how can I see things worse?
Yeah. Coach, better or worse?
I would say better. Yeah. And I firmly believe that because one, you always have to check your sources. I believe mainstream media plants it in our minds that this is how life is going to always be. They're always doing this to you. This is always happening to you. You may have seen it, but I don't think the world has seen it. When there's a black man crying on in a news interview and asking, why are you doing this to my neighborhood? You're enlisting 14-year-old kids to throw bricks through windows to harass cops, all planned and orchestrated. They don't show the clips when the police officer goes over and hugs the black woman, or the unit that's protecting the officer because he's now isolated and could be the victim of a mob. You know, so I always look at checking the sources. Why are these certain things happening? And it's a whole lot more good going on than bad. And even the evil forces that are behind it that would, plant bricks in neighborhoods that there's no construction going on, but we want to incite you, or we will have these hired hands to come out and throw bricks. So for me, I'm saying it's better because I'm not experiencing it at that high level. The majority of the people that I come in contact with, whether they're black, white, we love one another because we're human beings. And not all of my friends are born again believers, but you can see their eyes are being opened, because at the end of the day, it becomes, you end up fighting against one another. Now, there's a lot of black on black crime. I think there was 6,000 individuals that died at the hands, in terms of black on black. Those don't get as publicized, but the minute there's one incident that takes place of this, they're dubbed as police brutality. I'm recruiting kids from overseas as well, so I have to send a statement to them to say, hey, I know that there's a lot going on here in our country in terms of what you see. But know that that's not the majority of the people. There are a lot of good law enforcement. There are a lot of good people who are doing a lot of good things in this world. So don't, and they're